All right. So today's guest, let me just make sure we see Yannick over here. So Yannick is, so how, where should I start? He's basically the founder and owner of CASI or CASI Insights. Essentially, the organization is a research and advisory firm focused on providing reliable data and actionable insight for Africa. They basically do customer survey, market insight, data-driven advice services, and they're based out of Toronto. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're based out of Toronto, but I'll let you correct me where I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Um, Implemented in Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Kenya, South Africa. I hope I got that right. No, I'm missing one.
Tanzania. Yeah.
Tanzania. That's a new one.
Hmm.
Thank you, sir. So in terms, just to give you guys an order of magnitude in terms of the size of the company, they've been profitable and growing over the years. Yannick is originally from Cameroon, based out of Toronto, Canada. I understand you travel around the continent, but I'll let you augment what I just said and keep me honest. I'll give you about 30 seconds to a minute to keep me honest and add to it, please.
Okay. So thank you very much, Aris, and thank you guys for organizing this. And welcome to everybody who's joining. I hope you guys are safe and healthy, and your family as well. So my name is Yannick Lefang. I'm the founder and CEO of CASI Insight. So as Aris mentioned, we are a research data analytics company, just focusing on the African market. And so the company was founded to try to solve some of the problems that we all have as diaspora, especially from Africa, which is how do I find timely, reliable data to make informed decisions when it comes to investing in Africa or having an impact on the continent. So we started out back in 2015, and we, because there were not a lot of sources available, we basically sought out to be that source to provide that data. And the whole idea has always been to be able to have, again, timely, reliable data, and almost, we're not getting to real-time data yet, but almost, real-time data that allows our users and our customers to get insight and make data-driven decisions. So we've evolved over the years. I think we started as a pure data collection company, then slowly moved into what I would call an insight data analytics company. So we survey about between 3,000 and 5,000 people in Africa every month, 7 countries that Aris mentioned. And so we build a consumer database, which is now becoming our core product, where we would allow users to have access to data almost instantly, and being able to get insights. What that does as well is that we're able to reduce the cost of running research, because we can share the capability now. So you don't have to go out and do research for a particular individual, but with the data set that we have, that includes about over 1,000 questions that we've asked so far, we feel that we have enough there to suit some of the needs. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, we're just, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to start with a couple questions to understand Yannick's story and at the company level and personally, and then we're going to proceed with some real life situations. So the first question that really came to mind, Yannick, is what inspired you to creating the company? So you touched on the fact that there's a lack of data. It's pretty much a gap, but there's a lot of gaps out there, especially when it comes down to Africa. What specifically drove to this one over here?
I think a couple of things. My background, I guess my experience first. I have a engineering background, work in banking, so I was used to use data all the time to make decisions, and so hence the importance of data when it comes to business in general. So now going back, you look at the continent. I always wanted to also contribute, and I think it's the same for most of us in the diaspora, and even try to help with some initiative on the ground, and always felt that it was almost like throwing, dart with a blind eye, because you rely on your guts, you rely on your connection to your home country, you rely on your family and friends to give you information that then allows you to make decisions. And if you want to do something impactful and something that's sustainable, you need to really be able to have more than that. And I think I had my share of mistakes, trying things and losing money. So then I said, you know what, it's time to sort of think about it, um, I guess logically, because if we don't fix that, then everything we do, it's always the same. And same, if you do the same thing, you're gonna get the same result. So it's not gonna change. So that's really what drove me to start the company, and it wasn't easy, as you can imagine.
Yeah, we'll hopefully get to that. But what I'm trying to understand as well is, well, I understand there were struggles. What comes to mind to me is, how did you get your first customer, right? I suspect you were based out of Canada, trying to build and open something overseas in Africa. You got some data, assume, or maybe not. But how did you get your first paying customer?
So this is I guess this is not going to be a surprise to you guys, but my first customers were Diaspora. So it because again it this is a problem that we all have, and I wasn't the only one with that problem. So when we set up the our data collection capability, my first customer was Diaspora. I had one project I think the first project we had was in Ghana, and he was a guy who was based in the US. He wanted to start an e-commerce shop, really focusing on sort of the urban active target market, and wanted to assess really what was the size of its market. So we did a study, really trying to understand, okay, what's the customer journey look like? How many people have phone? How many people can actually have a seamless, e-commerce experience? And the interesting thing about that project was that, so initially he came about it looking at data that was available on the continent. And you go online, you Google, you're going to find a report from McKinsey and all these guys saying that the e-commerce market in Africa is a $50 billion market. But then you're not looking at going into Africa, you're looking at going to Ghana. How do you translate that into market size for Ghana? Well, usually what you would do is you would take that number, you look at the size of Ghana, and basically just do an approximation. But in reality, what you're doing is using a bottom-up approach, where your business really, it's consumer-facing business. So your real market is defined by your customer ultimately, and their ability to have, A, to want your product, two, to have a seamless experience. So when we did a study for this guy, we realized that what he had in mind was a tent. So of what of what he was thinking about. So we said, you know what? It doesn't mean that it's not a good idea, but what it means is that this is your market really, right? And what you need to know is, if these elements changes, then your market is going to grow, because there's always, in this specific case, there's always an assumption that e-commerce is big in Africa, but to be able to play in the e-commerce space in Africa, it's very difficult. I mean, you just have to, think about what it takes to have a seamless Amazon experience here, and really, look at every single thing that happens to make that work. So yeah, the first customer were, again, the Diaspora folks, and then we moved to other customers.
Perfect. Before my last question is, I really want to hear more about. I mean, you touched on some of the mistake possibly that we make. Wanting to do business back on the continent, based out of abroad. Can you touch on some of the mistakes you see Diaspora do, or maybe some that you went and essentially fell for? Maybe two examples, and then
Yeah.
the biggest one, I suppose.
I think the first one is to always default to do business back home. And what I mean by back home is if I'm from Cameroon, I'm going to go back, I'm going to do business in Cameroon, because we have this perceived idea that I know back home, and I'm mitigating my risk by doing business back home. Where I think what we should be looking at is really, if you look at the continent, where are the opportunities? Where is the lowest barrier of entry in terms of, from a macro business environment to even the customer, the consumer opportunity. I think that's how we'd have to look at it. I think that's the first one, because when we get into, I'm going to go back home, a lot of things, comes with that, and usually we make a lot of mistake afterwards, because again, we're going to rely on family, we're going to rely on, there's an assumption embedded in there that it may be easy. I think the second one is really underestimating the time and the resource it takes to start a business. And if you told me 4 years ago that I was going to be here, I would have said no. I thought I was going to be way ahead. So really, it's not a race. It's a marathon, really. So really maximizing the resource that we have. We did another project, just to give you an example. We did another project with a Diaspora guy, Tanzania, who wanted to build a mobile app, and was really ready to spend $15,000 to get a developer to build an app. And so when we did the research for him, we realized that you don't need to build an app for your business to work today. You can spend a third of it, and you can get something going. So also, realizing that we have limited resource, and how do we make sure we maximize, and how we so creative, and in how we go about it. So I think these would be the two mistakes.
Okay, I remember myself when I started. I do a little bit of agriculture back home, and I was a couple of years ago. I was looking at it. I had big ideas to having processing, manufacturing, farms, and stuff like that, like big ideas. And then I spoke to somebody locally. It was like, "Why are you worried about, going to the processing and shipping overseas? People are starving over here. We're just trying to eat over here." So it was a kind of an eye opener for me. That was interesting. All right, cool. So the next segment really is going to be around our what I call real life case. I sent out the case, but I'll come back to it shortly. So let me just lay out some instructions for the participants over here. So the first thing is I'm just going to present the questions. Then you guys going to go into breakout rooms, essentially different teams for about 5 minutes or so. You guys going to try and solution, essentially just brainstorm. Obviously, the question may or may not be vague. Feel free to come up with any assumptions that you want to come out with. And the first thing I would suggest when you get together is have one person who essentially we're going to be representing the team, and Yannick will essentially assess the answers. So the context is you live in North America or abroad. I realize we have folks from Europe. You live outside of the continent, and then you have a team you manage in multiple African countries. Sorry, so yeah, multiple countries. The challenge is how to hire and retain essentially your team, right? The options are, number one, you leverage your family, you extend the network, your family. And the assumption there is that, good people know good people. The second option is really focused not so much on their resume when they apply, but on their real life experience. And the third option is just accept that you're going to have to essentially fire a lot of people, right? Trial and error. Take it as an assumption. Does it make sense? Any question around? No? Cool. All right. All right. Looks like we are all back. Okay, cool. Let's get started and let's listen to. First of all, who wants to go? Or should I call somebody here? I have a couple names here. All right, cool. I'll just call. I have IG. I took IG here somewhere. IG. Yes. Okay, let me unmute you. You want to go ahead and share your thoughts on how you would solution this, and then we go to Rachel. Are you guys on the same?
Sure.
Rachel and IG? No.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. I guess in our breakout room there were different perspectives. If I missed something, some of the members that were there could jump in. But I think we sort of thought about there were three different kind of take at it. One where you're more reliant on trial and error, understanding the difficulty of it, but it could eventually be a much more sustainable solution for the longer run. From my perspective, I thought it'll probably be a combination of all three because it is important when you don't know the continent that well, or even the country, the local country where you're likely to be operating, or multiple countries where you're likely to be operating, but yet not knowing all of them. It's important to have people that you trust. I think in any business, it's very important. The trust aspect is not to be minimized.
Okay.
It's important to have that, but you don't necessarily. And then real life and trial and error, we need to be able to redeploy and adjust our approach. Sorry, it's taking a while. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. From my perspective, you cheated because you're supposed to go with one, but I'll give I'll let Yannick share his thoughts after I have Rachel. Was that your team? Were you part of the same team, or you're a different team? Sorry, let me unmute you here.
Is it Anik and
Okay.
Amal? Sorry, it's really I forgot your name.
No, that's fine. You go ahead. You go ahead, Rachel, because you put your hand up. So go ahead and share your team's thought over here real quick.
Okay. We in our group we have a very split view, but since they asked me to represent the group, and the one we went for was number 3, be ready to try more than once, especially coaching and training. Based on the experience, and I was sharing with them is like, I came from Cote d'Ivoire. My work is in Liberia, and I tried option 1 and 2. Now I'm ready, and that didn't work. So I'm ready to try number 3 now. So I think I'm trying number 3, and it's probably working a little bit better than what I thought. So number 3 is our option.
Thank you. Who else we got? Who did I miss? Sorry, I didn't capture all the names and all the teams. Can another team go and?
Sorry, Aris, mainly why we say that because if you are working in a country, your home country, it's probably easy to have people that you know, or good people. But when you're working in a country that you have no real people there that you know, and that's an issue. So you're starting learning to know those people and how you can work and
Okay, I think we got the idea. Who else wants to go? I had Ida and Mema here. Oh, Bryce, go ahead, man.
Sure, I will go for my team. I was with Ida and Aniset. So we basically, she was on her phone, so pretty much we didn't get enough time for her to like go over the questions because she couldn't see them. By the time I read it to them, it was like time was over. But we were more like lenient towards number 2. I know Ida also mentioned she has a preference for number 3, but both of us thought number 2 was great. Relying on real life experience is a good way to go, versus resume. But it has to be like proven experience. Experience talks a lot and talks about your capability of doing things. Probably not the best one. I kind of seeing number 3 more now, but I guess we went with number 2. So.
Okay, thanks, man. Who else we're missing? We covered all teams or no? Just one sec. Mema, did you speak? Did your team go? No. Okay, you go ahead and my apologies. Sorry about that. You go ahead and unmute yourself and share your thoughts before we wrap it up with Yannick.
So we didn't actually have much time to align to one answer, but we went with number 2 and 3. So there was some skepsis according to the resume. So one pointed out that what is in the resume does not actually mean that it's the actual skills or experience. So, and that's why I would say also we would train and coach. So maybe go with more like the experience on the job, or yeah.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. The man of the hour, Yannick, go ahead. Now you've heard different thoughts for different teams. How would you assess those answers? If you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay. So really quickly, I think the option we gave were pretty tricky, because it's very difficult to sometimes to pick between the two. And I think from the audience, you can tell that we've all been exposed to either 1, 2, or 3. So in our journey, and so I would say personally, again, it's very difficult to pick one of them, but you have to be aware. So number 3 means that you have to be aware of all these factors. That maybe your network is not the best. Maybe the resume is not always the best. So really, ultimately, what you have to be ready for is to train and coach and do it again, because now it's hiring people and finding the good people it's very difficult. This is even when you are in the country. So if you even abroad, it's even more difficult. But so I say number 3. The good news is, and this is from my experience, with technology, Zoom, Skype, you can do interviews with people online now. You can interact with them. You can have them on a trial period. You can train them. So, and I think you find, from my experience, I've always find we have about 8 people in Africa now, and all of them have various different background, right? And there's no one set background that works. It's really, the work ethic. For me, it's the work ethic is probably number 1 beyond everything else. Real life experience and work ethic. So yeah.
All right, cool. Looks like we're all back together. Let's start with Amal and your team.
Okay, we were trying to reach a consensus by the end, but time cut out. I think we're settling on number 2 as being the best way to move forward. So to quickly just try to prove that you have a worthy product and that it's going to be successful, and then maybe you can scale it from there or get capital from there. So get investors, depending on which industry you're in.
Cool. Who else? Frank, do you want to go ahead? Were you going to the same team? No? Okay, cool. Frank, go ahead and mute yourself and let us know what your team came out with.
Yes. So, everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think we went the same thing that the team before, go for 2. So what we all agree, or when you want to do business, I think the most important thing is to create value for your customer. So if you don't create value for your customer, there is no business. So this will be your focus, your most important things to do. So we totally agree with what Amal and her team pick up.
Okay, cool. Anybody else any other team had a different take? Because if it's the same, then there's no need to go through it. Who has a different take on this one? Wow, sounds like pretty straightforward. Okay, go ahead, Yannick. What are your thoughts around around this since you built $1 billion? You're building $1 billion
Oh, my
company.
billion. I mean, it's very interesting. I think the the groups are right in terms of number two, because you want to focus on creating value for your customer very quickly. But for me, it's number one, and the reason why is number one is because when you have from day one a very narrow focus on generating revenue, I think number two and number three comes as well, because very quickly, and I'll give you an example which we went through. If you think about what we want to offer or what we are offering today, which is data. If I ask anybody here in the group if they see value in data when they do business in Africa, I'm pretty sure 100% will say yeah, definitely. Now, if I go and then I ask everybody in the group here, are you now, can you pay $5,000 for research? Then some may say yes, some may say no, right? So the concept of value, I've also came to realize that from a business perspective, is really when you can equate that to people exchanging cash and revenue. So you have to be, I think if you very quickly focus on value, but with the revenue aspect to it, it would also allow you to also have a better understanding of who are your customers now. And again, I'll give you an example again for us. Early on, we did a lot of work. We pushed a lot with the diaspora, but then we very quickly realized that there aren't a lot of people in the diaspora that can pay $15,000, $20,000 for a research project. Right? That's a fact. That's a reality. Despite the fact that everybody agrees that data is so valuable in everything we do, right? And so we had to shift a little bit our target to go to, okay, who can actually pay that, right? And then we went with a very, very narrow niche of specific, corporates who can afford that, so we can stay afloat, right? And then say, okay, we're gonna move towards a solution. So the portal that we have now is a solution that we feel will be better suited, for example, for somebody in the diaspora, because now we can offer something within that range, right? And that's why having a very narrow focus on especially if you can raise, or if you don't have money, is important.
Okay, thank you. A couple of things. I think Armel, you had the question. If you have a question, can you please type it in the chat box? We'll pick it up right after. Before we have a second set of question that we want to pose to you guys in form of a survey. But before we get to that, I want to get from you, Yannick, what are the options today? Because you mentioned that a lot of solutions out there are not cost efficient, or at least are expensive. What are the options that we as a diaspora today, individual with ideas, have to validate our idea essentially based on data? What are the different options we have today, including I understand you have a product as well?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to validating your idea in Africa, there's a couple of things. There's validating your, what I would call your macro environment. So is the business environment good? Is the country growing? Is it friendly? What's your barrier of entry? I think if you go online, from the World Bank to, I think each country now, they have their own, it's like investment bureau, where you can get some information about, so you can have all that basic information pretty much free, but you just have to spend the time, go online. And even in some of the countries, country like Kenya, country like Rwanda, even if you go to the Treasury, the Minister of Treasury, they have a trove of information online about the status of SMEs. So who are the SMEs in the country? So what sectors is how is the government investing in such and such sector? So that's from a macro level. Then you get into the business level, so what I call the micro level. Is my business, if I'm doing a consumer-facing business, for example, is there demand, right? Like, what's the market size of my business now in my country, right? Where you need to do a bit more, what I would call bottom-up research, and for that, you have to either go with the research companies, but then again, the cost. Not only the cost, but also the timing. So the problem we have with standard research today is that if you come to me today and say, okay, I want to do research on, the ability to start a delivery business, in Africa, for example, right? You need to find, and if I say, okay, you know what, give me 2 months, and then I give you a research report, right?
Sorry. Sorry to interrupt. I want to be respectful of folks' time. Can you just give me, like, quickly the 3 options? You mentioned 1, going to the World Bank, 2, going to the individual countries, trade, whatever. Yeah, go ahead.
So publicly available information. So you have World Banks, you have WTO, all these your import export. Then microdata, you have again research companies. So you can go to the Ipsos, the Nielsen, the Kantar, or you can come to us. So these are the options. But then again, everything else, other than and I'm being biased here, but other than us, will not be affordable. I can tell you that right now. Okay. So that's the reality.
Okay. Do you mind letting us know the capabilities of your company versus, or your service versus the other ones? Right. I mean, you touched on the value side and how much all that, but practically, give me an example, a question that you can answer that another cannot answer.
So the capability, the portal that we have now, again, we went back to, I go back to my example about delivery. So let's say if you want to assess the delivery, delivery opportunity in Africa today, and you want to find out, where the opportunity is, using our portal, within 5 minutes, we can go from what's the opportunity in Africa, we can break it down in the 7 countries that we cover. We can now trend and basically showing you 3 years worth of data to basically show you the trend. So it's not just, this is the opportunity today, this is actually the trend as well. Then we can break it down by demographic and tell you, okay, you know what, your market is, women, your market is millennials, your market is this. And this is all done within 5 minutes, literally. If we have time at the end, I can show you. But that's the type of capability that we want to offer. So it's not, to do that today, if you go to any research company, A, they won't be able to give you historical data, which is context. And B, it would take them at least a month to do that in one country, right? So by the time you're done, you don't even know if the market is still there because things are moving very quickly on the continent.
Okay.
Good point. Serge from Burkina Faso, currently residing in California. So the first breakout room, I think, was around hiring and firing and how to build a team on the continent. The suggestion was, hey, you need to be willing to hire and fire and coach and train. How do you coach and train soft skills, especially when you're abroad?
That question was for you, Yannick, but we're going to extend it by about 15 minutes. We started late. If folks have to go, sorry, go ahead. You can leave respectfully. Yannick, go ahead with the answer to the question that Serge has, please.
I guess the short answer is it's very difficult, but it's not impossible. And I think you start with finding, again, the right skill. And I'm not going to be biased here, but this is based on my experience. I tend to find that women in Africa have better work ethic in general. And this is, again, I may be biased here, but this is my experience of back and forth hiring and letting people go. And sorry for the guys in the room. And because they're easy, it's easier to coach and to train and to and to work with them, right? Guys have the tendency to very quickly take over, and they want to basically be the yeah. So and the other thing too is staying in touch with your team on a day-to-day basis is possible today. Like we have it, like our team is on WhatsApp, right? I speak to these guys every single day. So it is able to communicate, value, principles, how, and they also see you, how you also operate, right? And they can learn from it. And one of the best comment I got was from the person who works for us in Cameroon, who basically said, and I'd never seen her before, and said she appreciated my management style. I don't even know if she knew what kind of what management styles, the different management styles are, but that's how she felt. So I think it is possible, to, and again, we have the 8 people we've had them for 3 years now. Like I had zero, 3 years after the trial and error, but once I was able to lock in the team, then, we've been working for that long.
Okay, thank you. We're going to grab.
Aris, Aris, if you allow me to jump here as well, because I actually have real life experience on this, and I want to share quickly.
Go ahead, real quick. Yep.
Yeah. So the same way that when you think about investing, you need to think about market entry, right? Which country to go to. You were alluding to that earlier, Yannick. I think for recruiting as well, it makes a whole lot of sense. If by any chance you are geographic agnostic, you could recruit wherever because the work that the team is doing is online. You need to take that into consideration. Some countries have terrific talent at very affordable prices. Other countries, not so much. Also, good talent is expensive. Do not expect to pay peanuts for really, really good talent, or you're gonna lose them because everybody's looking for them. So just those 2 points that I wanted to add. I'm not gonna provide specific countries, but I've worked across at least 5 different countries, and I've found one to be very, very good for recruiting.
Okay, Armel, you had a question, I believe. Name, where you're from originally, and where you're located at now, please.
Armel Bokam, live in New York, originally from Cameroon. It wasn't really a question. It was more like an observation based on the second case. I think I put it on the chat. I just think that we gotta kind of make sure that we understand the difference between selling a product and selling a service. I've done both, and my experience is selling a service is much more complex than selling a product. And the approach, because we're talking about a case, the number one answer, which is to start small and scale, is more appropriate when you sell services because everything depends on your credibility and your experience. You're not getting any clients in the service space if you don't have any credibility. So you have to build it. You got to get the first one, then the second one, and then you start to get the big players. But when you sell a product, you focus more on the customer. It's more straightforward because you have something that people really want to buy. And it doesn't matter if you did it before or not. You make sure that you build a decent customer base at the get-go. I mean, that's my experience. I just want to share that.
All right, thanks.
The other question that I had was around the market research. We spoke about outsourced market research, right? Well, the first one really wasn't. The macro research wasn't outsourced, but the second one, micro research, was outsourced. What about doing the research yourself? Either physically yourself, you're traveling and doing the research back home, or building the infrastructure yourself to do the research. Yannick, do you want to share pluses and minuses around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can do, and to be honest, you have to do some of the research yourself. I mean, let's not kid ourselves, because there's no way, it's part of the process, right? What I'm saying is that some of it, can be outsourced because of it's more efficient, right? So if you want to put together a team to do market research for you, you need to, I mean, there's a couple of things, right? Like you need to be able to have the expertise and skills to actually properly set up your market research, right? So, and this is from designing your survey to really understanding what you want to get out of it, and whether you're going to get what you want out of it, right? Because data is, garbage in, garbage out. So that's where having a research company would actually give you much bigger value, at the end of it. And also, when you do your research yourself, whether you like it or not, you're biased, right? Like you're going to tend to skew the research to where you want to be, because that's how we are. You have an idea, you think it's a good idea. All you're doing is confirming that. Like, unless somebody, and I had with Diaspora entrepreneurs specifically, cases where I presented the research report and they were not happy with it, literally, because it wasn't what, and then I said, well, again, like that's why you, that's the value that we bring, is we give you, an independent assessment of what, you think your market is going to be. If you don't agree with the data, then at least you make a decision. You can still go ahead, but it's a much more informed decisions that you're making at that point.
Cool, thank you. Any other question before Yannick is
I
getting?
have one question. Yannick, since you're in the research and observing the markets, can you maybe tell us what's the trend at, how is Africa moving, and if we should jump into something specific?
Okay, just one thing. What's your name? Where are you from? And where are you located at?
Sorry, I'm Mema. I'm based in Cologne, Germany.
Okay. Yannick, is that question too broad? I was about to say no, it's too broad, but if
just one trend or something,
I mean.
Okay, you know what? How about you touch on your COVID-19 findings?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can. So we've been, which is actually, that's a good point, Iris, because it's very topical. So we've been tracking the COVID impact in Africa since February. So we were probably the first company to start tracking COVID. And so so maybe, one or two insight. Unfortunately for Africa, COVID came when Africa was already not doing so well. I mean, if you take a country like South Africa, very muted economy for the past 2-3 years already. If you take a country like, I don't know, Ivory Coast or even Ghana, getting ready for an election, because we have a consumer sentiment index, which is I don't know, for those who are economists, we're tracking consumer sentiment every month in Africa. So purchase intent, job prospect, all that. So Africa is not very good at creating jobs. And we've seen this for the past 3.5 years now. And as a result, these consumers were already pretty stretched. So now COVID comes in. So you add on top of an economic crisis, really, you add on top of it a health crisis. So what we saw at the beginning, for example, was that people were more concerned about their livelihood when COVID hit, and not necessarily the health impact of COVID. So being infected by the disease, or somebody in the family being infected by the disease. So that's maybe one. Two, in the West, we saw a lot of lockdown, confinement, work from home, a big rise in digital, remote, company like Amazon. E-commerce really took really went up. Not the case on the continent. We still, despite the fact that some country had implemented lockdowns, people are not going and shopping online, because to shop online you need the infrastructure. COVID didn't create all of a sudden and digital e-commerce infrastructure. What people are doing is they're shopping offline, but now they're adjusting their shopping. So they try to go to the shop where it's less busy. They try to buy in bulk, things like that. So I mean, this, in terms of what else can I tell you? Like, there's so much, and we actually saw month over month how one trend that was in line with the global trend is the need for more protective product. So cleaning, mask, gloves, definitely an uptick. People looking for these products. But these are a couple of things that I can lockdown again. People are not. It's not you. and we see that with the data, you can't really implement lockdown, in Africa because of, just
the reality of it. Okay,
the
cool.
reality of the continent. Yeah.
Let's, Amal has a question, and then while she poses this question, could you please get ready? Maybe we're going to spend, Yannick, 1 or 2 minutes going over your.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Whoever could stay, feel free to stay. Obviously, we are almost running over time because we started late, so feel free to leave if you have to. I just want to take a look at Yannick's portal.
Okay.
Go ahead, Amal. Where you from?
Yeah, so Emma again.
Yep.
So I'm originally from Egypt, but based in New York. My question is just on how do you validate your data, or how do you trust different sources, especially if you're looking into researching in different countries that are not your home country, and different levels of corruption?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. So I think, and that's you need ideally, because even in the West, I mean, data. I don't think there's one source that can tell that I have the golden copy of reliability in terms of data. So, but in the West, you have several sources, right? And then at least you can find truth in the middle, and so that's the approach that you should have. Again, we're not saying you should go with one source. I think when you have more sources, it's always better to at least pool and compare. And so the reality is going to be somewhere in between. When you can't, I would say get with, if you have to choose, always choose primary data. Primary data means data that's been collected at a source, as opposed to secondary data or tertiary data, right? Because again, and we focus exclusively on primary data. Our data is collected from, survey-based data, because we rather be the primary data collector than the secondary or the tertiary, because we know on the continent, even the IMF or the World Bank can put a stamp on how accurate the GDP estimate is. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
We good?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, good. So again, as I was saying, the specific scenario that we were talking about, which was the delivery business, I'm just going to put that data set on top, and I can show you quickly, how we go about doing this, right? So this data set, basically, so you're looking at, again, 3 years worth of historical data, okay? And so here, if you're interested in the delivery business, for example, and you say, okay, I'm looking for people who are willing to pay a fee, because that's your business, for delivery, then basically, if you look at this graph, you have about 35%, and this is 7 countries. So you have about 35% of people saying, okay, I'm willing to pay. So there is a market, Then you may say, you know what? Okay, obviously I'm not going to go to the entire continent. I need to pick which country I should be able to target, right? So then you have, this is the breakdown by country. And again, we're still looking at 3 years worth of historical data. And very quickly, if you follow the orange, which is what you're looking for, you see Cameroon 62%, Ghana 27%, Ivory Coast 50 something percent. And then you may say, and interesting, so you can already see some interesting stuff here. So if you look at South Africa, it's only 7%. Now, then you can say, you know what, I'm in Nigeria. I always wanted to look at the Nigerian market. That's where I think I want to go. Then you can zoom into Nigeria, basically, and say, okay, I'm going to focus on Nigeria. Okay, but then this data, what it's telling me is that, okay, I have about 30% of people that are willing to pay. Now that's one shot. That's one data point. Doesn't tell me much. What about trend? Right? Then I can say, you know what, I'm going to bring trends. Actually, no. So, yeah. So now I'm seeing the same data for 2017, 2018, 2019. And what I'm seeing very clearly now, if I change the just so we can keep the same color. Actually, so follow the green one now, because this is the green. So I can very clearly see that there is definitely a pattern where for 3 consecutive years, people are willing to pay to get delivery done. So there is definitely a market. In fact, the proportion of people that are willing to pick at the store is actually dropping. So you definitely see that, okay, there is something going on there. Then you're going to say, okay, fine. I've now confirmed that, there is a trend. And what else can I do, right? And so, okay, I'm going to focus on the most recent data, 2019. Then I'm going to say, okay, what's my demographics here? Like who's driving this shift? Is it, men, women? Is it, blah, blah, blah. Before actually, I can, let's look at the data, the 3-year historical data, and let's bring in gender, right? Do we have a trend with like men, women, who's driving this trend basically year over year? You can very quickly see that. You can take and say even between, so age group, occupation, you name it. So very quickly, we went from high level data, broke down to country level data, we trend for 3 years, and then we narrow to demographics, right? So that's the kind of capability that we are offering now. And this is just one example, really, for delivery. So very quickly, I can go from, I'm going to pick a country, then I'm going to confirm whether there is actually a trend, and I'm going to actually even go to and say, okay, when I go and go about this opportunity, I'm going to focus on millennials, men, women, because that's where I'm seeing the trend. And by the way, next year you're going to have this data. So if from now to when you actually operate in the country, things changes, you're going to be able to get that information, right? So that's and I can show you, for example, I mean, this is what we have for COVID. I mean, we've been tracking COVID all the way down to categories, like what people are purchasing more, purchasing less because of COVID, and working with brands to help them actually understand how COVID is changing the landscape in Africa.
Okay, thank you, Yannick. So we're going to share your information. Can you leave us with some last words of wisdom before we wrap it up? I know we went over time already, but I think it was valuable. Maybe some last word that would let everybody enjoy the weekend.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Serge was saying. It's saying, we need to do more of these. We need to have a bigger group. We need to have, a lot more people to aid discovering what each one of us is doing in the diaspora. Have a more concerted effort to go about businesses in Africa. Again, we build this portal for diaspora. For $500 a month, you can get access to this data, and that's our part, basically, because we wanted to bring that to a point where it's affordable for folks in the diaspora. So I thank you for those who took the time to come. Wish you health during this pandemic, and I think Africa is still the most exciting market.
All right.
Thank you to everyone who participated. We truly appreciate it. And a couple of people have been attending these workshops weeks after weeks. This is our third one. If this is the first time you're attending, thank you very much. Please keep on coming back. But from those who have been attending week after week, a number of them have reached out personally to me to first of all, to say thanks, but also to ask how they could support this initiative further. For that, there's just a couple of things that we really would like you to do. One is that there's a survey that is being sent week after week. Please complete the survey. As much feedback as we can receive, the better we can curate this content for you, the better we can organize these workshops so that it delivers the value that you should expect and that we should deliver. Two, you will note that I think the participants are fairly concentrated around New York, around Toronto, and maybe some around California. And basically, these are hub centers from where Aris is, where I am, and so forth and so on. We need more people from Germany. Mema, I think you're in Germany. We need more people from Germany. We need more people from France. As much as possible, we want to cast as wide a net to inform people around these workshops, and our unique intention in leveraging them to empower all of us in the diaspora to enterprise, particularly on the continent. The workshops are uniquely designed to tackle specific business opportunities. The workshop today is pretty unique in the sense that it is kind of sector and industry agnostic, but other workshops that we have are uniquely curated to tackle one specific business opportunity. So we had in the past one around fashion, we had one around distribution, we have a couple of ones coming up as well around healthcare. We want as much as possible individuals who are interested in those unique opportunities to attend. But to some extent, I also want to say there's always a nugget or two that you can learn from an industry, even if that is not the primary industry that you're passionate about. So if you can attend those workshops, those that you are not uniquely primarily interested in. But if you can't attend for time reasons or other responsibilities that we have, please help us share. As much as possible, we really want to get the word out and get this audience growing. And with that, I'll stop, Aris.
Thanks, Yanni, for your time. Everybody stay safe.